Hello, poodling arounders. Thank you for joining me once again. Today's podcast is for those of you who actually want to poodle around your garden or outdoor space with dough, pizza toppings, baking trays, paella dishes, or whatever food and cooking implements you want in your hand, knowing that you're going to bring the Mediterranean to you rather than having to hop on a plane to the Mediterranean. It's about travelling to the olive groves through the aromas conjured up by your own pizza oven, but even more specifically, one that you've built yourself and which should last you about 20 years or more if you've got it right. But how do you get it right if you want to upgrade your outdoor lifestyle in this way and travel through food without leaving the back garden? I asked today's guest, Andrew Manciocchi of Orchard Ovens, the names behind ovens for celebrities, top chefs, and Netflix documentary stars, what's involved, especially with the Euros coming up, and even more reasons to throw a pizza party on the horizon. So, Andrew, here we are on the cusp of summer. Well, looking outside, I'm not so sure. But now it's the ideal time to think about building your own pizza oven, isn't it? And getting that fire burning inside to rustle up some amazing pizzas.
Well, I think the comment you made about the weather was the key there, Jane. I think actually we're probably 2 months, 3 months beyond where you might have thought about starting building your own oven. But this year's weather has just been incredible. I don't think I've even cut the grass yet this year.
Oh, I have managed that.
Yeah, well, but I mean, by now we would probably hope that you'd be starting to use your own DIY oven. But 2024 has been a bit exceptional in terms of the weather just not being suitable to get out there and do building projects in the garden.
No, I mean, we have had a little bit of sunshine lately. And with the Euros coming up in June, I suppose there's an added incentive to build a wood-fired pizza oven for your back garden and get that footy party started, isn't there?
Well, I think obviously we're all hoping now for this, should we call it an Indian summer, or we just want an early Indian summer?
Just any form of sunshine.
Yeah, just please start now. We need to go back to COVID year when I think the government must have poured something on the clouds because we just had the most remarkable year ever. Well,
Yeah.
of course, the ecologists would tell us that's because there were no cars and trains on the road. So the atmosphere was much better, which is actually even more scary, isn't it, to think that that's what our climate might be like.
Yes, I remember well that April. I was working and everybody else was outside sunbathing.
So on the assumption that we are going to get something like that and we all want to get out in the garden, certainly the Euros out in the garden, you know, a few beers in hand and the television on the patio, has got to be everybody's dream summer, especially if England or, for that matter, in my case, Italy win it. But yeah, I mean, what could be better than being outside cooking with your friends? And, you know, the beauty of the ovens, as we've said for many, many years, it's not just about pizza, it's about everything you can do with the oven, and the whole family gets involved, the children, everybody wants to get involved. It's not the male province that the barbecue seems to have become over the years.
But is a pizza oven something that people think you can just throw together yourself? Maybe creating some sort of metal framework and then concreting around that? And if so, why is that not good enough?
I think, I mean, obviously we've been doing this 22 years now. We probably started the whole thing, I would guess, in the UK in terms of it being considered a domestic product, or certainly commercially as well. You know, thousands of pizza ovens are out there now, whereas when we started, there were one or two. But yeah, I think, as I've said many times over the years, this is an oven. It's an oven for cooking everything. It's not just a pizza oven. The fashion, if you like, is pizza ovens. And we've seen this proliferation of little tiny metal things from China that you can put some pellets in, you can put a gas thing in, and it will, after a fashion, cook a pizza. I would have to say that cooking a pizza in your own garden, it doesn't really matter what that pizza comes out like. It's still going to be the best pizza you've ever had because you've done it yourself and you've done it in the garden. But certainly in terms of looking at it as a pizza oven, the little metal things, the little things that people kind of cobble together. I mean, we had one guy who was digging up clay off the riverbank to make his own oven, and you know, he blew up his wife's exercise ball and coated it with clay from the riverbank, and then popped it, and kind of ended up with something that he managed to put a fire in.
Incredible.
You know, as you know, I was partnered with Jamie Oliver for a number of years, and Jamie himself has used a flower pot, used a terracotta flower pot to create some kind of oven, pseudo oven. But obviously, the market we operate in, the product we're promoting and selling is a traditional Italian wood-fired refractory clay pizza oven that's been manufactured by the same family since 1890. The history of the communal oven in the villages, everybody cooking their bread together, everybody cooking their meat together, some people using the fire, some people using the residual heat. All the ovens getting destroyed during the war. They can't be rebuilt because the artisans aren't there. And the Valeriani family came up with the prefabricated oven kit, which is now kind of copied the world over. And that's evolved into your little tin ovens, and to everybody wanting to have a go and get a part of this whole movement, if you want to call it that. You can buy the cheapest, oldest car that will still get you from Land's End to John O'Groats, but it's a different journey to doing that in the best Rolls Royce that's available on the market.
Yeah, unless you've got my cooking skills.
but we're all somewhere on that path, aren't we? We're all somewhere on that journey. I sold an oven at the weekend to a gentleman that's been following me on YouTube since 2019. And he was absolutely raving, I've finally got to the point where I can have some of this,
So what can you offer to those who want to build a wood-fired oven? It's a sort of kit that you've got, isn't it? And why is this kit better than the metal frame and concrete example that we've just sort of talked about?
The key thing to it is, obviously, if you want to do more than just stick one pizza into an Uni or a Gosney or any of those brands, Gino di Campo now has his own brand, Aldi have an oven, Lidl have an oven, all of those things that you can stick one pizza in. And maybe, if you've got some skills, you might be able to cobble up one or two other things in there. They're not very big. They haven't got very big mouth openings, but they do a job. The key to the products that we sell and promote, if you like, with it being a more of a wood-fired experience, a family experience, and the ability to cook anything in the oven, including your Christmas dinner if you're Gwyneth Paltrow, is size. So the key difference is size. So with even our smallest oven, you would fit 4 Unis into our smallest oven. So, you can do your roast potato, your roast chicken, your vegetables, and still probably stick a garlic bread in the mouth of the oven all at the same time. The residual heat properties of a proper clay oven mean that if you had that oven on for a couple of hours cooking a meal for the family, you'd still have residual heat in it, potentially even the next day for cooking breakfast or having even more fun. Warming it up again is a 20-minute experience instead of a 45 to an hour experience. And obviously, the bigger the oven gets, the more space it takes up, the heavier it gets. You can't just carry it home from the garden centre in a cardboard box. You've got to think about assembling it in situ, because just the weight of the components and the logistics of actually putting it together.
So getting down to basics, how difficult is it to use one of your kits? I mean, I consider myself the queen of polyfiller application, and I love to mix a bit of concrete and sort of shove that around. But
Can we stop talking about your makeup, please?
How rude. But I was going to say I get a trowel out to fill in a few gaps, but, I won't say that now. But these skills of mine, they're not going to cut it for making this DIY pizza oven kit, are they?
No, I mean, the truth of the matter is that the actual kit itself is not rocket science. The actual kit itself is very, very simply assembled. And it's a little bit heavy. It's better with 2 people because some of the components are probably too heavy safely for one person. That said, most skilled DIY people wouldn't have too much trouble handling most of the components. It's all about the techniques of putting it together. And the real skill is actually in the preparation for the oven, building the base. That requires some brickwork or some block work skills, or you've got to go to a metal worker potentially and have something made up in metal, because the oven, even the smallest, lightest oven, is probably something around the region of 600, 700 kilos fully assembled. So it's got to go on a fairly substantial surface. And the fact that you're building something that's probably going to last you 15 to 20 years, maybe even longer, you want to build that on something that's going to last the time as well. There's no point building a 20-year capable pizza oven and sticking it on a wooden worktop that's going to wear out in 3 years, because you'll just be doing it again. But the kit itself is very, very straightforward to put together.
Okay. So the key step then is to start with this base.
Yep.
What comes next?
Well, the first thing to think about with the base, and this is a mistake we see a lot, we get a lot of people phone us, they've already built the base, and then they phone up about the kit. So the biggest mistake people make is they'll look and think, oh, that's an 80 centimetre oven. And they forget that 80 centimetres is the cooking floor, then you've got the cooking dome, then you've got the insulation, and then you've got the outer housing. So actually, your base doesn't want to be 80 centimetres. Your base needs to be 110, 120 centimetres. The biggest mistake we see is people getting ahead of themselves, building the base, and then finding that there isn't a kit out there that fits on their base. So they're then into either extending the base or knocking it down and starting again. And they've already wasted time and money. So the first thing is to establish the measurements that you truly need for the oven that you truly want. So I'll get people that have built an 80 centimetre base, but they want a 100 centimetre oven. So it's all about doing the research first and understanding it, because as we all know, the internet is a wonderful thing, but it's also the worst thing that was ever invented by man. It's full of false information. It's full of experts who are not experts, and people make a lot of mistake by following stuff that's on there that isn't correct. But how are you supposed to know what's correct and what isn't correct? At the end of the day, we all gravitate towards brands we trust. And I would like to think that Valeriani, with 130 odd years experience, ourselves being the originators of this product in the UK market, are people you can trust.
Yeah. So I think then, from what I've seen, there are two main parts to this pizza oven. Is that right? That need to be kind of put together and then well, I don't know, is it cemented in place, mortared in place?
Yeah, essentially it's two components. It's a cooking floor and it's a cooking dome. There are accessory elements to it, the front art, things like that. But the three key things are the cooking floor, the cooking dome, and the manifold for the chimney. The positioning of the manifold is important. The way you put the floor together is important. The way you put the dome together is important. And then the rest of the construction really is a building project. But yeah, the components of the oven are very, very straightforward. The key with the Valeriani brand is the cooking floor. They're the only brand in the world that manufacture their own cooking floors in-house. Everybody else kind of pulls in products that will do a job, but those products are usually designed for electric storage heaters or electric pizza ovens or whatever. Valeriani design the floors to work with their ovens, be they wood or be they gas ovens, be they Neapolitan style or be they traditional style. The chemical mix and the baking time and the pressure under which those components are put together vary. And there's an awful lot of science goes into what looks like something you could knock together with a Play-Doh kit yourself. But the measurements, the proportions, the aspiration, if you like, the way the manifold works with the mouth of the oven and the volume of the oven and how the air flows in and how the air flows out is all critical to getting temperature, maintaining temperature, not having smoke.
Yeah. You're putting these pieces together, but is that a two-person job at that stage once you've got past the base? You say it's quite heavy, but are those two things too heavy to kind of put in position yourself? Do you need to get a team of mates round to help you with this?
A domestic kit, I'm kind of, I'm going to say well into my 60s. I'm not quite well into them. I can still lift all of the components of a domestic kit. That being said, some of them are in the region of 30 to 35 kilos. And in European law, we're not part of Europe anymore, but in European law, 25 kilos is supposed to be the maximum that one person lifts on their own. So the correct legal answer is some of the heavier pieces you shouldn't be lifting on your own. The truth of a man speaking to the world is that, I'm a 63-year-old guy that can still lift those components on my own. Are they easier to maneuver with two of you? Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Is it essential that you have two of you? Probably isn't.
And I presume you've got instructions at this stage to help you do all this.
Absolutely. We support all of our clients with full instructions. We'll talk the ears off the builders if they'll listen to us to get things right. We have, unfortunately, over the years had to develop a policy of we now will only give that information out to customers that have committed with a deposit or whatever, because we've just spent years running rescue missions for companies that are selling kits but offering no support to their customers. Customers are building bases that then don't support the ovens, or bases that the ovens don't fit, or the ovens don't work because they're not being put together correctly and things like that. And we suddenly realized that we were just becoming an information center, rescuing other people that couldn't be bothered to do the job properly themselves. And we've had to basically pedal back from that and say, okay, we will completely hold everybody's hand if they've bought our product. And that's a bit selfish, but unfortunately, it's just the way the world has evolved.
Yeah, indeed. Well, you're a business at the end of the day, not a charity, aren't you? So, at a practical level, how much space do you need in order to have this DIY pizza oven?
The most popular size that we sell is the 1 meter internal oven. Basic reason being that it has a nice big mouth opening to work with, and you could get 4 or 5 good open trays in there. If you're going to build a 1 meter oven, then you really need a base size, a minimum of 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters.
And how far away from your property can you have that?
Well, it doesn't matter. You could build that up against a wooden fence. You know, there is no external heat. So from that point of view, that isn't a problem. But what I always say to people is keep it near the kitchen, because the one piece of feedback we get consistently is that people use the oven far more than they ever thought they would. And they're in and out the kitchen for ingredients or for pots and pans or for knives and forks constantly. For example, we've just done an oven for a gentleman down in Kent. It's his second oven because he's moved now. The other oven, he's had it 12 years. He's moved to his new home. The most important thing to him is to get the oven replaced. But the key thing for him this time around was to build it closer to the house.
Right.
Last time he built it at the bottom of the garden against my advice, and he said he regretted it because he was spent the whole time up and down the garden fetching things. This time he's gone for it much closer to the house.
And do you need to think about emissions if you're fitting one of these ovens?
All of our ovens are DEFRA approved. Once they've gone through the initial 10-minute light up phase where you get a bit of smoke because you tend to use soft wood to get the kindling going, and that creates a bit of smoke. But once everything's working perfectly, there's very, very little smoke. That having been said, I probably wouldn't build it up against the neighbour's fence, because there will be, like I say, for 10 minutes, a bit of smoke drift. And if the wind's in the wrong direction, it's a bit like lighting a bonfire in the garden, isn't it? It can annoy the neighbours, especially if she's got the washing out.
But will there be kits out there that don't have this DEFRA approval?
It's an interesting question, Jane, because when we got the DEFRA approval 20 years ago, we jumped through all kinds of hoops. We've spent over a week having scientists in the garden testing on all the ovens, and it was a 3-year process to get through government, and it was an act of parliament that was eventually passed to give our ovens the DEFRA licensing. Sadly, like many things in recent years, these things now have almost become here's my 50 quid, can I have a license, please? And lots of products claim they've got the license. In truth, they've probably applied for the license and they may never get it. The thing to do is to check the government website. It is an article of government, and you can check the government website to see what truly has got DEFRA support and what hasn't got DEFRA support.
Okay.
There is a grey area in that some people argue that an oven in the garden doesn't come under DEFRA. But of course, if your neighbours do start to complain about the amount of smoke or the amount of smell you're making or whatever, if you've got the DEFRA certificate, there's nothing they can do about it. Whereas if you haven't got the DEFRA certificate, they can take it a bit. So if you've spent thousands of pounds building your own oven and the council knock on the door and say, "Can you take me to bits, please? What can you do?"
Mm. Okay, so that's something to really think about, isn't it? Thinking about aesthetics with these DIY pizza ovens, do they all look the same once they're built in a garden, or can you actually tailor those to how you want them to look?
The answer to the question is you can tailor it to look like anything you want it to look like. That having been said, probably the most popular design that people gravitate towards, primarily because of cost, but also because that's what they see abroad, is what we call the rendered dome. So it looks like a dome and it's created with cement render. Mistake, in my opinion, that most people make when they do that is they overlook the fact that we live in Britain and the ones they see on holiday are all in the Mediterranean. So the thing with a rendered dome is it is a sponge for moisture, and that moisture gets into the render, then it gets through into the insulation, and then it gets through into the oven over time. In the Mediterranean, they don't have that problem. They have the occasional storm, but most of the time it's dry and the render is drying out all the time. Over here, if it gets wet over winter, you come into spring and you've got the whole, what we call the curing process, i.e. drying the oven out slowly. You're having to do it all the time because you've got to get the moisture slowly out of the refractory clay, then out of the insulation, and then out of the render. And if you do that too quickly, you're going to crack the oven or you're going to crack the render. The render will naturally expand and contract because the oven expands and contracts when it heats up and cools down. That creates hairline cracks, sometimes bigger cracks in the render, which in our climate, the moisture gets in even more and it accelerates that whole deterioration process. So my advice is always, unless you're going to build the oven under cover, then don't go with a cement render in this country. So we see lots of things built out of brick. We've done things even out of timber. The one in my garden was built out of timber. And as long as the correct parameters are followed for distances, safe distances and heat protection, there's no reason why you can't build it out of anything and have it looking like anything you want it to look like.
Okay. Thinking about rendering then sounds like a good thing to do because I'd assumed, well, I've seen a lot of people doing that, and I assumed that was something that was the norm.
We regularly get people that, my oven's cracked. I mean, and it will. If you think about render in this country, we normally apply it vertically on walls.
Mm.
Yeah. And that's fine. The water runs down through it and goes out through the bottom. But with the oven, you've got that huge area, probably a metre and a half, nearly 2 metres squared area that the rain is just landing on with nowhere to go other than soak into your oven.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on this earlier about the longevity of these ovens, but I think you mentioned something like 20 years. Is that realistic for a DIY pizza oven?
Well, I'll tell you a story now that has happened January this year. I was approached by a customer who we installed their oven 18 years ago in the garden, just outside the kitchen. And they've had 18 years of pleasure from it, to the extent that they approached me and said, "Andrew, we want to move the oven to a slightly different part of the garden and put it under cover so that we can use it more than we do. We already use it a lot, but we want to use it more. We want to use it year round. And we've seen pictures on your website and things like that, people putting them under cover. So we'd like to do that." And after 18 years, we took their oven to pieces and we've reassembled it without any replacement parts. So they have now begun another, hopefully 18-year journey with the same oven. But instead, this time it's been rebuilt, slightly different design, undercover. So they've now got a complete seating area undercover. The oven's undercover. They can use it 24/7. So, 20 years. Yeah, I say 20 years flippantly. But
Is that dependent on the DIY skill that's gone into it?
well, fair play. We did install that the first time around and we've installed it again this time. So, I'm not going to suggest that that is a factor, but yeah, obviously theirs has been done properly. So the oven has lasted that long. I have to say, seen ovens where people have done it themselves and then we've come to try to move it and we've had to replace components, or maybe it couldn't even be moved. So there are elements. I mean, but even with professional builders, I like to tinker with cars, but am I a Formula One mechanic? No, I'm not. So even professional builders, it's not what they do all day, every day. Landscape gardeners, it's not what they do all day, every day. And there are little tips and techniques and little things that you should do and that you shouldn't do that make a difference. One of the worst examples we had was a few years ago, a landscape gardener, because the customer wanted a particular look, said, I'm going to build it on a piece of granite. And I said, don't build it on a piece of granite. It needs to be on a concrete slab. But he went ahead and built it on the piece of granite. And less than 6 weeks later, he was ringing me saying, it's all collapsed. The granite snapped into and it's all fallen into the ground. Things can go wrong when you DIY. And when I say DIY, I include professionals that don't do this all the time.
Mm, yeah. And I suppose a manufacturer with the reputation of Valoriani isn't going to put its name to anything that's poor, is it? So that's a really good basis on which to trust this brand, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think any business survives 140 years nearly without some sort of credibility, trust, honesty, and knowing what they're doing.
And
How many brands last that long?
thinking about, sort of something that gets a bit hidden away and people tend to forget about it, but insulation, that's pretty important, isn't it? In whether it's a DIY kit or any kind of pizza oven. But is that something that people can get wrong?
Yes. Just this morning, I've been in the warehouse and we've always used a body soluble heat blanket. Okay. The reason being that it's pretty nasty stuff. It's a bit like a very dense loft insulation. We all know how that makes your skin feel itchy and you see the particles in the air and stuff like that. The blanket we use isn't the same as that. It's much more dense, but more importantly, it's what's called air soluble. So if bits do break off, they dissolve in the air. So you don't get that kind of mist of broken particles. We've recently had a supply issue. So we've changed supplier temporarily. They've sent some stuff. And I've just looked at the box this very morning in the warehouse, because yesterday we had a situation where we'd used some of this stuff and it didn't appear to be performing the same as the normal stuff. And there it is in black and white on the box. Do not breathe this stuff in. It causes cancer.
Gosh.
Yeah. But that is being sold by a company as a pizza oven insulation.
Oh, that's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, we're experienced enough and long enough in the tooth to have spotted that very, very, very quickly. But that is the problem. I mean, I've seen people, in fact, I know of a manufacturer, and I'm not going to name names, that uses just loft insulation to their ovens. Again, it's not the right product. The reason there are thousands of types of insulation is because there are thousands of types of application. You cannot put the wrong size wheel on your car. It's a wheel, but it's got to match the car and it's got to match the other wheels. So, yeah, insulation is important, because if you've got the wrong stuff, A, it can be dangerous. B, it'll affect the life expectancy of your oven. And C, it'll affect the performance of your oven. It won't work as well. It won't retain the heat as well. It'll take longer to get hot. It'll be hotter on the outside, therefore more dangerous to the children. There's a lot. Insulation is very, very important.
Now, what if you get this kit and you're ready to go with it, but then you find it is just beyond your skills? Is there some sort of DIY rescue squad that comes in wearing capes and tights and underpants on the outside?
I'm not going to tell you about me wearing my tights. That's got to be true. But we offer 3 levels of service. So basically, you can buy the kit, and I suppose you could say we offer 4 levels of service. You buy the kit, you go away, we never hear from you again, and you do your own thing. More often than not, you go away, you're on the phone saying, what do I do with this? What do I do with that? What do you recommend for this? What do you recommend for that? And like I say, we'll hold your hand all the way through the process. We've even had situations where if we're out and about ourselves and we're in the area of a project that somebody's doing themselves, we'll drop in and have a look over their shoulder or give a bit of advice to the builder or whatever. The next level is that people will do all the building work themselves because they have a local builder that they trust or a local landscaper that they trust, but they'll get us just to go and put the oven together. So if you think of it, going back to the car analogy, you're building a kit car, but you're building the engine from component form. Rather than do that yourself, you get a professional mechanic to
Mm.
come in and put the engine together for you. You do the rest of it. You put the engine in the car, you build the car, you paint the car, you put the seats in, you do all of that yourself, but you get a specialist to assemble the engine for you. So if you think of it like that, people can get us in just to put the oven together. And then obviously, again, going back to the car analogy, you can get us in and we'll build the whole car for you.
Yeah.
Literally from there's the spot in the garden, I want it, from foundations up, we can do the whole thing.
And that sort of verges on the kind of bespoke garden service that you offer for a variety of different ovens, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, literally, I mean, the project we've just done, the customer, he wanted his oven because he'd had it in his previous house. But this time he had a specific design that he wanted in mind based on those years of experience. He had some specific things that he'd realized didn't work for him the last time that he wanted to correct this time. And he wanted to incorporate a sink for washing up because he was out in the garden and he wanted water on hand. And he wanted to incorporate his green egg because he found that he used his green egg as well. So he wanted that actually built into the worktop run that we'd got at the side of the oven where he does his preparation. So it was all part of a garden redesign with a bit of patio in front of it. And it was specific bricks that matched in with the 200-year-old house. And it became a very bespoke project.
Mm. And I guess the cost of a bespoke project can be anything, can't it? Because it depends what people want. But how much are you going to spend if you want to go for a DIY pizza oven kit and try to do that yourself?
DIY pizza oven kits, ours start around 1,500 quid. Sometimes if we've got offers on, they can be as low as 1,200 quid. And they go up to maybe £4,000 or £5,000. If you want to go for the kind of professional model oven, the smallest oven in the professional range, which a lot of the top chefs, some of the more affluent customers fit, then you're kind of in the £6,000-7,000 range. But the average is around about £2,000 to £2,500.
Mm. And I guess there's a great satisfaction that comes with having done this yourself, isn't there? The people that buy these DIY ovens, that's probably part of what they want to get out of it, isn't it? The satisfaction of having done that project, shall we say?
Absolutely. I mean, the customer for this product is somebody that likes doing things themselves. They like that satisfaction of knowing they've done it themselves. But I come back again to the car analogy where I often say this to customers, you're going to go out and build the kit car. You wouldn't build the engine. 99 times out of 100, probably 999 times out of 1,000, you're going to go and buy the engine and you're going to fit that engine into your kit car. You're not going to try and create an engine from components that you've picked up from this car boot, that car boot, something off Amazon. You're going to go and buy the engine. And the pizza oven is the same. Build the oven, build the aesthetics, the base, all of that, but actually fit the correct engine inside of that.
Yeah. And how long is it going to take me to build if I get cracking?
Well, we can do a rendered dome project in 3 days, but that's working, 8-9 hours a day and cracking on and getting it done. So I'd realistically say for a DIY person, it's probably 2 or 3 weekends work.
Right. Okay. But they shouldn't really be going for the rendered dome, should they? So
No, I would always advise against the rendered dome unless the dome itself is going to be protected under cover of some description.
yeah, so it's going to probably take a little bit longer if they want to do something else.
Yeah.
Mm. And once I've got my pizza oven built, will I get advice about things like how to manage the fire, how to build the fire? Because that's an important part of using one of these ovens, isn't it?
Yeah, and it crazily, even after all these years, and thanks to many of the celebrity chefs and even some restaurants, people still use them wrong. A lot of people put the fire at the back. I mean, I went into a restaurant the other day, takeaway restaurant, that's one of our customers, and he'd got the fire at the back and he'd got a huge fire and he was really struggling. And, he'd actually done away with 6 tables to extend his pizza counter further away from the oven because he was working too close to the oven, too hot. And I went in and I said, hang on a minute, you're doing it wrong. Why you want the fire at the side? That makes it much easier to use, blah, 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 blah. And the oven works this way. And within minutes, he was already cooking better pizza in a much more relaxed environment, and realised that he'd just thrown away 24 covers that he shouldn't have thrown away. So, yeah, I mean, it's incredible how many people don't use the ovens properly. We always give people the support and the help to do it properly. Sadly, maybe my voice isn't as loud as, maybe James Martin or Jamie Oliver, who, for television reasons, put the fire at the back. But I mean, they know that's not what to do. They know how to use the ovens properly, but using the oven properly with the fire at the side doesn't always create commercial aesthetic that some of these guys want, the fire
Yeah.
on the television screen or customers being able to see the fire.
And how long will it take to actually get a DIY pizza oven kit if I decide to order one today?
I have one tomorrow.
Oh, really? It's that quick? So somebody listening to this could literally ring up and get one ordered.
As long as it's in stock, and this time of year stocks go low, we're constantly reordering. But if it's in stock, we can get it out on a 24-hour service.
Right.
Unless you want something specific, in which case it could get as bad as 6 weeks if we're waiting for stock from Italy.
Right. Okay. So hoping that's not the case then, and I'm sort of picturing the scene in June when the Euros are about to kick off. What can I be serving beyond pizza from that DIY pizza oven?
What couldn't you be serving?
Right. Okay.
With a level of skill.
He says, looking at Jane.
Yeah. But no, the thing with cooking is if you've done it yourself, it's always good. Whether your friends think it's good, I suppose that's a factor. But what's important is, do you think it's good? So I've even done warm salads in my oven, baked Alaska, so that's ice cream in the oven. I've cooked chips in the oven. That, I think I've said this before, that the hardest thing to master was Yorkshire pudding. It took some mastering, but absolutely anything. It's an oven. You can cook anything in it. You just need to evolve a technique.
Yeah, so it's just experimentation, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what I need to do. I mean, I have cooked some very nice potato dauphinoise in there. Lovely jacket potatoes. I think I tried an aubergine parmigiana. That was quite nice. So, yeah, I haven't just done pizza.
We mustn't lose sight of the fact that pizza's great fun. The kids love pizza. Pizza is popular. There's no denying it. And like I say, as a family event, the children getting involved, etc., it's great fun. But equally, so is throwing in a joint of pork or a joint of beef and just carving it off for your friends.
Yeah. Okay. So now, if you are like me and you know that all the DIY work would be an ask too far, what's the next best solution you could go for if I want a quick fix to get a pizza oven into my garden? Is it the Fornino, which is the oven that I've got here?
Yeah, I think obviously the Fornino ready to go out of the box. Again, I'm using an example, but I spoke to a customer yesterday on the Isle of Man who recently, 2 years ago, bought a kit, built an oven in his garden, and has now sold the house. He's moving on in the world, and he wanted to take it with him, but couldn't. 2 reasons. One, obviously, logistically, it's messy to take it with you. You've got to dismantle it and rebuild it. And this guy is temporarily going into rented accommodation while he waits for his new home. So that wasn't on the agenda anyway. But obviously the second reason is the people buying his house wanted the pizza oven. So, I'm not going to say he got his money back, but it was a factor in helping him sell his house. But this time around, he doesn't want to be without an oven while he's in the rented accommodation. So he's going to go for the Fornino 75 because it's a solution that's ready to go out of the box and he can take with him next time and either install in the garden or pass it on to a family member or sell it online or whatever he wants to do with it. And maybe again, at some point in the future, have a permanent oven built in his new house.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Forninos as a ready to go solution are absolutely fantastic. And hopefully very shortly, our own version, UK built, cheaper derivative of the Fornino that is currently in test and working very, very well. So we're just in that and hope to have that to market very soon.
Okay, so we need to keep a lookout for that. Where can people find out more about the kits and the Forninos?
The bulk of the information about kits lives within our commercial website because it's kind of not a strictly domestic product. So you'd find that on www.orchardovencommercial.co.uk and follow the links to the kits section. If you want more information about what we can do for you in terms of a full build for the garden, then look at orchardovens.co.uk. So without the commercial, just orchardovens.co.uk. And that is much more an outdoor kitchens full service website.
What advice would you give to anyone right now who's seriously considering this?
If you're seriously considering it, the best advice I can give you is to talk to us, either myself or Matt, and we will give you the best honest advice. Are there certain secrets we're going to keep until you place an order? Yes, there are. But do your research, get the best information, and don't believe everything you read online.
Well, I think that's definitely inspired me to do more with my pizza oven, Andrew. Although, having said that, I do have to hop off and see Coldplay at some point this summer overseas. But then again, you've got connections with Coldplay, haven't you?
Yes, we have got connections with Coldplay.
Would you like to divulge?
Would I like to say, well, obviously Chris Martin was married to Gwyneth Paltrow, who was one of our first celebrity customers.
Yeah.
And I got to know Chris's brother extremely well. I mean, I did text him once. I'd been to see them at do they call it Main Road, or do they call it the Etihad? They call it the Etihad now, don't they? Can't remember who plays there. It's one of the Manchester teams.
Yeah, insignificant
anyway,
Manchester team, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they played a concert there, and I was lucky enough to be on the guest list. And I just happened to have Chris's phone number in my phone. I've never used it, but it was in my phone because he'd phoned me once. And I came out and I was so impressed. I just texted him as the concert was finishing. I just text, "Wow, Chris, that was," and I used a word that I probably shouldn't use on a podcast, "awesome." And within less than 30 seconds, he texted me back saying, "Thanks, Andrew. I really appreciate that." And I just thought that was incredible. There's this guy, this worldwide superstar, and he's literally in the wings, having just walked off stage, and he's texting me back.
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it?
It's incredible. And it just shows the humility of the man. Very, very humble man.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. That's been a wonderful explanation of what to do with a DIY pizza oven kit. And hopefully a lot of people will be inspired to actually start their little project this summer.
Good. And whether it's a Valeriani from Orchard Ovens or not, enjoy and have fun and be safe.
Great. Thanks very much, Andrew.
Thank you, Jane.
So now, if you're wondering if you can manage all of this, do be realistic about your skills and the time that you've got available. If you're wondering if you can master the art of cooking with fire, the earliest way of cooking known to man and in our DNA, as Greg Wallace said on MasterChef UK, let me tell you that if I can do it, anyone can. I was really nervous when I first built my Jenga-style framework of kindling and then lit that, and even more dubious when it came to adding wood and moving it around the oven. But I managed it, despite feeling that all of the neighbourhood's eyes were on me as I did so. It's really mesmeric once your fire is lit, and it's a perfect way to achieve some mindfulness while you're watching the flames flicker. My problem is that it's often just me to cook for, which doesn't seem worthwhile doing. So when I was thinking, what a shame I don't have more people here to cook for with this oven, it made my mind wander. So here's a challenge for you to end this episode. Which 5 famous people would you most want to invite to your wood-fired pizza party if you could? So I haven't made you play this game alone. I've also taken part in it myself. So who would my 5 chosen guests be? Well, this is going to come as no surprise to absolutely anybody who knows me, because number 1, top of the list, without a doubt, would be the person I most want to meet in the world, which is Guns N' Roses frontman Axl Rose, who I think I could probably do the best PR job for, who I can absolutely empathise with when it comes to perfectionism, who I think I understand quite well. And I'm gushing now, so I think I better stop there. On the sporting front, it's a toss-up between Rafa Nadal, the tennis player, and Charles Leclerc, the Formula One driver. Then I want a touch of hilarity, so it would be comedian Bob Mortimer, who I only have to look at his face and it makes me laugh. And maybe on the acting front, Keanu Reeves. And then finally, and people laugh at me for this, but every time he appears, I always say, always nice to see Bex on TV. So it'd be really nice to see David Beckham at my pizza party, especially as he's a Valoriani owner and would know all about firing up that oven and getting that food cooking. What could be better? So give it a go and see who you'd want to invite to your pizza party. And do also give it a go with a proper wood-fired oven. We've all got a bit of a fire starter in us, as I've discovered. Until next time, my poodling arounders, whether you are in Malibu or Melton Mowbray, please take care of yourself and remember that life is much more fun when you're poodling around